Hello everyone, it's Ange de Lumière here. I'm a spiritual lawyer and an intuitive business strategist, and I come on every Monday at 7 o'clock UK time for High Vibe Monday because I believe that no one should feel miserable on a Monday morning. So today I'm going to be joined by Michelle Whitehead, who's another lawyer. She's a practicing lawyer, unlike me. But she's quite unusual. Here she comes. So I'm going to invite her to join in. If I can, I'm going to add. If she's, yes, she's coming on. And just to say, I'm absolutely excited to have Michelle with us today. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Ange. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. What time is it in your world?
5 p.m.
5 p.m. I love that we can talk to the other side of the world as if we were in the same room almost. This is
Yeah.
so wonderful. So I've invited Michelle to talk to us today because I am fascinated by her profile and her attitude to law. She's so unusual as a lawyer. First of all, look at the, well, I know not everyone will see the background because this is going to be a podcast at some point, but just for our listeners, the backdrop that I see it is fairies. So she's like the lawyer in fairyland.
That's right. I get to be the lawyer who works in fairyland. It's a little woodland trail with mossy rocks and flowers and red and white spotted mushrooms.
So do you want to introduce yourself briefly first, and then I'll ask you a few questions because I'm very, very nosy.
Of course, you've done a good job already. Yeah, my name is Michelle Whitehead. I am a lawyer who works, I'm an Australian lawyer. I work primarily from home, entirely from home, and my clients are all online entrepreneurs. And mainly female. I tend to work in that area. A lot of them are nutritionists and naturopaths and health practitioners and intuitives and coaches and therapists and people who either have come into their business from a corporate background and really don't feel like the type of legal compliance they had to do in their corporate world fits with their new business, or people who have always been creative and nurturing and they just don't want to get into the sort of legal barbed wire fence type feeling that they associate with contracts. So I write contracts that care. I help them create contracts that, as I describe it, they're a sacred container that hold the space for a business relationship to flourish.
Yeah, I love
I'm
that.
also a mediator.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. Contracts that care. And I want to say, and sadly, and I had the same experience when I was a lawyer, people avoid you because they think you're going to create problems instead of solving them. And also they have this like kind of reaction that they don't want to think about problems and they prefer to wish or hope for the best. Now this is a good attitude to start with, but actually it's much better to map things out, to clarify. I call that creating boundaries, so that actually boundaries make you much safer in the relationship with your client than if there wasn't, because things are clear. It's so easy to have a misunderstanding. But I just signed up a VIP client, by the way, with a contract that cares. And I map up in there. First of all, I use plain English, and this is one of the things I love you for, because when I was a lawyer in corporate, I always tried to write my contracts with plain English, but it wasn't always possible because there's this whole culture. So luckily, back in France, it was not as restrictive as it is, for example, now in England. Lawyers are almost bound to, at least when they're in corporate, they don't have a lot of choice on how they draft their contracts, because there's a lot of pressure from insurance companies and all sorts of things to write things a certain way. But I think as entrepreneurs, we have more freedom and we can actually make these contracts almost like a letter. What do you think?
Well, I say that I tell my clients that a contract should be written in the love language that your clients expect and deserve from you. It should be written in the same language that you use for your marketing, so that it feels like it comes from the heart of your business. You know, a lot of clients say that when they've tried, you know, they've either used templates or they've, you know, had a contract or terms and conditions drafted by a traditional lawyer, and they don't know what it says, they don't know what it's doing there, they don't know what its purpose is or how it sits with them. It kind of feels like an alien appendage attached onto the edge of their business because they think they should have it rather than something that they love and really enjoy having there, and they know it brings them and their clients clarity and certainty and consistency, and it protects both of them.
Yeah, because it's so easy to assume something. And it's the same with relationships. We should almost have contracts with anyone we come in contact with. That would be a bit extreme, but you know what I
Well,
mean.
Carolyn Myers suggests that we do with her sacred contracts thinking. She suggests that we actually do have contracts. And as you know, a contract is not necessarily oral, is not necessarily a written document. It can be an oral agreement. So if you think about it, we do have contracts with everybody we come into contact with. You
Yeah.
know, even you offered an opportunity to me to have this interview, and I agreed and accepted, and that created responsibilities and understandings. The same thing happens when my daughter asks me to make her a sandwich. You know, there is a contract there, and I say I'm going to do it. All you need to make a contract is offer and acceptance and clarity of terms. So
Mm. And consideration. If I know
and
a man,
consideration.
so if you keep on doing things for free without ever, then it doesn't work so much. Anyway, I want
True,
really
true.
we get
Consideration
back.
is an important one.
I see you as a very peaceful person. Were you always that way?
Um, I think so. Um, yeah, I've always been conflict avoidant, I think would be the way to say it. Um, yeah. And I was raised Catholic and I'm still a practicing Catholic. So all through my life, a common theme that's guided my life is the St. Francis prayer, "Make me a channel of your peace." So that's always been that's sort of the core of my being. So yeah, I think I've always been a peaceful person.
I think because I feel the same.
Except as a child when the relationship between me and my sister was not at all peaceful for many years.
Okay. But I think, did that make you stand out when you did your studies? Because I feel I stood out amongst my peer. I never really felt I quite fit. And then it got more and more. I'm not saying this in a horrible way, but I think there was something different. And I feel there's something different about you as well. You're the first lawyer I've met that I really feel, oh my God, she's a bit like in fairyland like me. There's something different, but you bring that energy. Everything's in energy. So, you know, a lawyer that brings a peaceful vibe to anything is such a gift. It's so different. I hope that the people who watch this interview, listen to this interview, agree with me, because you deflect everything when you have that sort of vibe. Do you agree with me?
Yes, yes, I do. I don't know that I particularly stood out for that reason when I was at uni, but then I didn't spend a lot of time actively present at uni. I was very sick for a lot of it, and I studied at home most of the time.
Okay.
I wasn't able to attend lectures, and I actually finished my degree working through distance education in the end because became too sick to continue. Um, so I did not fit in, but it wasn't, I don't think I particularly stood out except in my absence, perhaps. The thing that crystallized it for me was when I did my mediation studies, when I did my master's in law, and I majored in alternative dispute resolution. And at that stage, I was actually looking for a way out of the law. I had felt that practicing in a small country town I wasn't going to be a criminal. I didn't do criminal law, and I refused to work in family law. Although I'd write affidavits for both of those things, but I wasn't a litigious person, so I wouldn't actually go to court and represent clients. And in this small country law firm that we were in, they already had solicitors who did that and who enjoyed that. What they didn't enjoy was the work where there were boxes and boxes of documents to wade through, or, you know, the ones that had really difficult questions of law that needed a lot of research. So I would pick those up, which was mainly the business law. You know, the clients who had business law questions, and that was my introduction to business law. And so it was always small business. I was never actually in corporate. But in that life, I'd felt that I couldn't be fully me. I felt very fractured. I felt that there was the homeschooling me and the Catholic me and the lawyer me and the poet me and the storyteller me, but they all had to be kept in separate boxes. And I was getting really fed up with that. I didn't like the ethics, the way that ethics tended to be twisted in the workplace. I didn't like having to time cost and write down every second of every day what I had been doing for each client and then justify how much I got paid. And I was only being paid a tiny, teeny, weeny percentage of what the clients were being charged. So I had them saying, but we're paying you a fortune. And I'm saying, but I'm getting, no, I can't tell them that I'm getting a tiny amount. So it was that disjunct, you know, everything was hidden, everything was behind walls, and I couldn't go on with that any further. So I had the opportunity to do my master's, and I majored in alternative dispute resolution, thinking at that stage they were about to revise the civil law in New South Wales, Australia, where I live, and they were going to bring in a requirement to the legislation that you have to make a genuine effort to resolve a dispute before you could go to the courts for a civil law claim. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is what we need in the law. So I'm going to go and become a mediator and help people with this. And of course, the law never actually made it through Parliament in New South Wales. It got squashed by probably the political pressure of too many large law firms who didn't want to see their bread and butter going out the window, perhaps, or some reason. But yeah, the actual experience of studying mediation, of learning all of those, mediation is very tied in with mindfulness and respectful communication and all the sorts of things that I'd been learning through my homeschooling and parenting journey as well. I'd been doing a lot of, you know, not attachment parenting, but beyond that, the kind of parenting, radical unschooling and all the things like that I've been exploring. And the more I explored that, the more I learned about respectful communication, and the more I learned about mediation, and it all sort of meshed together and seemed to all fit, and it wasn't fragmented. So I quit my job as a lawyer and went to become a mediator, and I discovered that actually I knew nothing about marketing and I knew nothing about running a business. So in the process of learning that in the online entrepreneurial world, I met more and more women who had incredible, gorgeous businesses, but who were sabotaging themselves because they didn't feel safe. And I started to realize, actually, guys, I've got what you need here. I can help you put those foundation stones under your castle in the air so that you can go forward feeling grounded into your business and actually expand it and build the amazing empire that you want, because you have that sense of safety. And that's pretty much when I forgave myself for becoming a lawyer. And once I forgave myself for becoming a lawyer, I could start to envisage the kind of lawyer I really wanted to be, the kind of lawyer who could bring all of me to the table and not be fragmented anymore, just be me, but bringing all of that experience and education to serve in a way that made me really happy.
I adore this. And you know, I feel the same. I had to forgive myself for being a lawyer, and now I own it completely. I own it completely. I have no shame anymore, because when you're a mindful, loving lawyer, and I know this might sound like an oxymoron, but it's not. And looking back, I have a lot of friends at uni who are very loving people. They might not be as woo-woo as I am, but they are very loving, and they come to their work with great ethics and a great attitude. So just because there can be, and I think when you mentioned the fact that there's twisting in the law and in law firms and everything. I worked in a law firm for 2 years, so in a big international law firm. So I know what it, all these things about the timesheets and everything, and how there's a hidden and all this, like almost like tower where lawyers like to hide behind in their little in their little office up there. But it doesn't have to be the only way. And I love the idea that we could also transform things from the inside. But that's more my bit, because I want to go back into corporate and start to shift all that.
I think a lot of the law is changing, because when I think about the lawyers I know and have known previously, they were all very caring people. Law is a very caring profession, but there is the stereotype and the culture.
Yeah.
And both of those things are like blocks. And a lot of lawyers, the walls and the shelves that they put up are out of fear.
Yeah.
And
There's so
the more
much fear.
they learn, the more that lawyers learn to relax that fearful part and to trust. And I mean, lawyers, that's probably the lawyer's biggest problem, is trying to trust. Trust isn't something lawyers do very well. But the more you learn how to,
But they're hired not to trust in some instances.
Exactly. It's their job. It's their
the
job not to be trusted.
You're good as a lawyer.
Yeah. And I was always too naive and trusting to be a real lawyer anyway.
Well,
I tell that to people when they come to me for dispute resolution. I'm happy to mediate a dispute, because I can trust you to, I can trust myself to manage the room and to hold the space for you guys. And I can trust you each to, have your best interests, bring your best interests to the table, and work towards what is really important to you. And if I see that not happening, I can call it. Yeah. Whereas if you want me to go in gung-ho and all guns blazing, I'm not the right lawyer for you, because I'm naive and trusting, and if the other side tells me something, I'm likely to believe them rather than keep digging for the lie. So yeah, I'm just not that kind of lawyer.
But at the same time, this is your strength, Michelle, because if you come with that attitude, you actually melt down the defenses of the other person so quickly.
Yeah.
And I want to give you personal.
And I've found that too, that if you actually connect with the lawyer on the other side and treat, and show that you're being genuine, that to some extent most of them will let down their defenses too, and you can actually get a real agreement much, much faster than with all the posturing and bravado and
And that's probably one of the things that my employers didn't like about me, how fast I resolved problems, especially when I was in the law firm, because that meant less money in the pot. But
exactly. You're supposed to kind of, from the boss's perspective, you need to draw it out into, no.
So I want to share an example. I'm not going to go too much into the details of how I did my own little bit. And it was only like a couple of days ago. So that was really interesting. But I want to share, because I feel it will help our listeners. I'm divorced and remarried. And even though we're civil with my ex, I would say we're not exactly like friends. So, and there's been this pattern going on where I sort of resent the fact that I've had to raise my kids on my own, and that he's in another country, because I never, when I married him, I never expected to divorce him. I was really there 100%, and he was a lawyer in a law firm, and he was there 10% in our relationship. Now, this is my point of view. Obviously, if you ask him, he'll have a different one. and I honor that. Okay, so I come with my filter. His filter at the moment was, she only comes to ask me for money, and I'm fed up with that. So we were in this loggerhead almost, and for the past 18 months, I actually didn't speak to him at all, because we had to deal with an extremely stressful situation in our family. And I felt that every time I talked to him, it was a nightmare. His anxiety levels were so high. So I actually asked my elder son, who's 23, to filter and just could be the go-between. I know, you know, this is not perfect, but that was the best way I could deal with it, with something that was very, very touchy. And so 3 days ago, I reached out to him and I said, why don't we talk? And he found every excuse under the sun not to talk to me, even though he's the one who complained about not talking. And I insisted. I had done the Ho'oponopono for with him. So I'd like to talk about that as well as part of our interview. You can fill in more of the details, but basically it's a Hawaiian practice of praying for, well, that's how I see it. It's to come to a person you have a conflict with, or a judgment or something difficult, with an open heart of honoring them and thanking them for everything that's happening, even the bits that you don't like. So I don't know if it's very important the order you do it in, you're going to tell me, but you just say, thank you, I love you, please forgive me. And what's the last one?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And so I did that for a whole day thinking of him before I contacted him. So I was just sitting in this space of recognizing how frustrating it would be for me if I had money and someone constantly asked me for money and asked me to be, as my son calls it, a wallet dad. I love the expression. So I did that for a whole day, and I didn't do it to solve the problem. I just felt it was the right thing to do, and I didn't even know I was going to contact him at the end. It just happened all like this chain of events happened, and I was just in awe of what the result. So when I reached out, sent him an email and said, why don't we talk about it? Because I was asking him for money, but not for me, for my son. And because my son, whatever, he was sleeping and he needed the money really quickly, so he put me on the spot, and I said, do you realize that if I ask for money for you instead of you directly, it's actually going to make things worse? And he said, yeah, but I can't be bothered, please, please, please help me, whatever. So it was to do with his student loan not coming through. So it was pretty serious. It wasn't one of those, you know, oh, I blew my money. Do you know, have you ever heard that joke when it's an American joke, I think, where there's a student that sends a message to his dad, say, no man, no fun, whatever. And his dad says, too bad, I'm sad, your dad, something like that. But it wasn't that kind of situation. So I sent this email out and said, no, I don't have time for this. And in any way, you don't care. And so he kept on coming back with all these reasons why we shouldn't talk. And every time I came back to my heart space and to the heart coherence and to saying, I love you, I'm sorry for all the years that I greeted him without, you know, really intending to, but there was no dialogue. And in the end, after 4 or 5 hours, he finally says, okay, let's talk. And he gave me his phone number at work. So it was late in the day, so it wasn't gonna, he still works long hours as a lawyer. And we talked for well over an hour. And at the end of the talk, at the end of our conversation, sorry, he thanked me 3 times for taking the time to listen to him. I basically listened to him and never responded, or almost. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd listen to listen, not to defend myself. And it's probably the first time I never felt defensive in his presence. Now, this is short of a miracle, honestly. And I think that's the power of Ho'oponopono. But you have to do it without actually expecting someone, because at the end of it, I was also asking him to help me with some expenses to go and visit my son, to help sort out some things. And he still said no, but I had no hard feelings about it, because I'd come to the conversation with 0 expectation as to the outcome. I just showed up. And I'm sure this is what you aim for with your clients. And I think it's just it's just amazing. It's just such a different space than coming guarded and, you know, like he did this and he did that and he should be doing this, all that judgment. You just drop the judgment.
Mm. Yeah. So Ho'oponopono, I first discovered while I was doing that master's in law, because it was introduced to me as a form of mediation. And it actually evolved in Hawaii as a form of dispute resolution for the community. So the community would get together with a priest or powerful man of the village who would lead the community, would have the people, the whole community come together. And I've actually described, there's a free ebook on my website that actually describes the history and how it evolved into the modern version we have today. There was Dr. Joe Vitale actually took it, and the stages of the process mirror what it's been condensed down to into the phrase today, which is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and I thank you. And who you're actually speaking to when you say those words is the divine, to God or to the universe or however you see it. And it's actually about taking responsibility. So it's entangled in with quantum theory about how if something's coming up for us in our space, it's coming from us. We've created it in some way because of something that needs resolving. So they talk about it as a form of a way of clearing the energies. And the actual word Ho'oponopono has its roots in entanglement of fishing nets. And it's an untying of knots is what it's all about. So yeah, so I'm sorry is actually the acceptance of responsibility, taking, you know, this is in my power, it's been brought to me for clearing, I will own it. And I regret it. Whatever my part in this is, I am sorry for it. Please forgive me is the notion that it's not all about you. Like it's also an absolute trust that you will be forgiven, or you know, ask and you should be forgiven in that sense. So there's an element of trust there, a trust that it will be cleared, it will be repaired. I love you. You know, that's the most powerful phrase in the world. And I thank you. And again, thank you is an ultimate expression of trust. You're saying thank you in advance, knowing that things will change. And it may not be the change you're looking for. There may not be, as you said, there's no expectations there. You're not asking for the other person to be changed. You're not asking for anything else. It's just, you're asking for that clearing of the emotions that are holding you tangled. Yeah.
I love that.
I actually use it. I use it when I'm going into a mediation. I'll say it. I'll hold my clients in my mind and say it over and over and over again. I use it when I'm arguing with my husband. I just, you know, I've put it on repeat, you know, because it stops all of that defensive thinking. It stops all of that need to justify yourself, the need to be right, the need to dissemble and say, oh, but it wasn't, I didn't. It just allows you, it clears the space. It helps everything settle so that you can just hear what's going on for them, or what's, you know, even if it's just something that's happened, like something that's happening in your life. If it's the traffic, you know, you're stuck in traffic and you've got to be somewhere, sending love to everybody in every car, and, you know, I'm sorry, whatever in me that is creating this blockage around me, I'm sorry. No, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And a peace descends, a calm descends every single time I use it.
Yeah. I feel it calms the nervous system, if anything else. And that is huge because when you come with a calm nervous system to any situation, things seem to dissolve. The difficulty, the battle seems to at least soften, if not dissolve. So
Yeah.
it's extremely powerful.
And I also combine it with tapping. So obviously you can't sit here going like this when you're talking to someone, but I tap on the inside of my fingers like this. So I'll be saying, the back of my head will be saying Ho'oponopono prayer. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And my hands will be going like this up behind my back or under the table. And it's another method of regulating the nervous system, to calming things, to clearing my stories and my patterns that are coming up to be cleared. And because everything is connected and it all works on a quantum level as well, in a way, you're actually clearing what they're bringing up to be cleared as well. So you're working at that higher level of connection while you're enmeshed in the tangle down below.
This is beautiful. And I find it really interesting as well, because I've had my own journey of dealing with fears. Um, I was an extremely fearful person as a lawyer. And even when I started being a psychic, because I was afraid everybody was going to say I'm a fraud, I had this really imposter syndrome. And I still probably have a tiny bit of that energy left, but it was essential for me to work on that so that people could even trust me. Because if I couldn't trust them, and if I was in this defensive position of people are going to call me a fraud, how could that ever work? Because I'm bringing to myself that energy that I don't want. So you
Yeah,
always create the conflict if you have that kind of attitude, don't you?
exactly. And I mean, you're never without fear. So every time I write a contract for someone, or someone uses my DIY pack, there's always that little fear there, because how can you control 10, 15 years? Who knows how long they're going to be using it? Who knows when the problems are going to be arise? The reason why lawyers try and wrap everything up in red tape is they're trying to cover every foreseeable possibility, and then some unforeseen ones as well. But yeah, you have to take that trust on board and actually give your fear, I give my fear to God and work on what's being created at the moment. Like, people ask me, will your contracts stand up in court? And I have to say, and the other thing is to just be honest and be authentic and say, look, I have no idea. But my hope is that they would never end up in court, because they do such a good job of managing the relationship in the here and now that they don't need to be written to be read by a lawyer in 40 years' time when something's gone horribly wrong, because they're managing the relationship now at every stage. And that's what Ho'oponopono and things is doing too. It's holding you in the present and putting you in your calmest, best space to deal with whatever's coming up in the present, both for you and for the other person, so that you can manage it, you can clear it, you can work with it right now, rather than suppressing it and waiting for things to explode down the track. So it actually, that being in the present, fear, if you think about it, fear is almost always imagining what could go wrong in the future, or replaying what has gone wrong in the past and worrying about it coming back. There is very rarely, unless you're in immediate danger, there is very rarely any fear in the present, here and now. When you stop and analyze, what am I actually being afraid of? And what is causing me fear right now? It is almost always either future or past. And even if you are in immediate present danger, you hardly ever really have fear, because the adrenaline surge is there and you're taking action, like you're running or whatever else. It's even then, even in that moment of, say you've got the big dinosaur biting your butt, that moment of running, what you're afraid of, your fear is of it catching you. So it's still a fear of something in the future. So when we calm our nervous system and realize that it's not actually a big dinosaur biting our butt, it's just an argument with our husband or an argument with a client or something, a story we're telling ourselves, or something we're imagining going wrong at some later date, like imagining someone's going to call you a fraud. Once you realize that it's a future thing and that it may never happen, and you bring yourself back into the present and the here and now, and what am I doing right here, right now? When you stay in that present, fear dissipates. There's no fear in the present moment. There's no fear in the now.
Now, something quite interesting happened for me just now listening to you, and I want to share, is that it finally made sense why, when I decided to leave the legal world, I trained as a clinical hypnotherapist. Because as a clinical hypnotherapist, I explain daily. I'm not practicing the clinical hypnotherapist anymore, but I still use a lot of the methods. You always talk about that, about the fear that's the fact that it's not actually real, that it's actually in the past or in the future, that you have to be in the now, and it takes us into mindfulness. So I love how all this is related, and how, in effect, in a relationship, you need to take responsibility for your own fears and stop throwing them at other people, because when you do that, you become aggressive and you start acting out things that might not even exist.
Yeah. So this fear, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. The fear is what you're sorry for. The anger, the putting yourself in the position, the putting the other person in the position, the not being in the now. That could be enough to be, people think, oh, but I haven't done anything wrong. Why? How can I say open? Because I'm not sorry. I haven't done anything wrong. Well, have you drifted out of the now? Have you drifted into fear somewhere? That could be what you're sorry for.
I just love it. I love it, love it, love it. And as you say, it's so important to take responsibility for ourselves, because even though we might not think we've done anything wrong, it's only when we look at the other person's point of view with total openness that we can realize that we might have had an impact that we didn't foresee. And it's only if we accept. This is something that was actually quite difficult for me to manage when I was a child, because I always saw other people's point of view systematically. I used to drive my mum nuts, because whenever she was angry at someone else, I would always see someone else's point of view. And it is difficult for me even as a person, because sometimes it means that I kind of neglect my own feelings, because I know that the other person's point of view might be completely different. But I suppose it's part of being elevated, of being able to see the bigger picture. And I find it incredibly helpful at the same time, because it means that you're able to take back to you and say, well, I'm not aware. It's not that I need to be afraid of how people are going to react to what I do, because otherwise you wouldn't do anything. But it's also being aware that, okay, this is where I am. This is my responsibility. If I bring fear to the table, it's my responsibility. If I have baggage, it's my responsibility. And I will, as much as possible, prevent other people from being the recipient and carry my issues. Already, if you do just that, it's enormous, isn't it?
It is. It's massive.
Yeah. It changes everything.
One of the biggest ways to prevent conflict or to reach a win-win solution faster is to just put yourself in the other person's shoes too, is to just look at things from their perspective, and then to take responsibility for your own part of the problem. That's probably the entire aim of mediation in one sentence,
Yeah, and yet we're not encouraged at all to act this way. I wish this was taught in school, and maybe it is in certain evolved school, but that's what I teach actually with my kids, because I homeschool as well, as you know. And when we start the day, we have this moment where we play drums and then we talk about our feelings, and everybody has the time and space to talk about them without anyone coming to say, but that's not true, and I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And we just and it's funny, because sometimes I see the other child is fidgeting on the floor and they're like biting their nails because they're not allowed to interrupt. But it softens something, because then they know they have their turn and they can say, and you in the I know it's a native practice and I don't like cultural appropriation, and it's the same with the Ho'oponopono, but I love the talking stick practice for that reason. And that the fact that the more you resist listening to the person, the longer the person is going to have the talking stick, because it's not enough just to listen, just to wait for your turn. You have to listen until your heart opens.
Yeah. Being heard is such a gift to give someone.
And I think it can actually resolve conflict. I think that's what happened with my husband. And after that, because I went to visit my son, he sent me little texts to say, how is it going and everything. This hadn't happened in years. And all that from standing with the Ho'oponopono. I hope my story can inspire some people. And I didn't even do it for today's interview. Do you remember we were supposed to have the interview last week? I actually now believe that it was postponed for that reason, because I would have had a story to share today that I wouldn't have had last week. Even though in theory it was because I had a bad cold, and it's true. I love how the universe kind of always makes things happen at the perfect time.
It does. It does.
It humbles me, to be honest. This stuff humbles me.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a phrase that that my clients often don't want to hear, but one that is incredibly powerful is, what if there is no problem? And it's one I'm sure you recognize as the source of it too. But, what if there is no problem? What if this is just meant to be? And once you take away the problem, you can start to work out that, okay, so this is, all of that Byron Katie and loving what is. It all ties in. Every time you look at these things, they're all working at the same problem from different angles, but they all come back. And they're just like little pieces of one massive jigsaw puzzle. What if there is no problem? What if we just need to love what is presenting for us right now? How can I love this problem? How can I deal with it?
And that's
once you start to
that's probably why I call myself a spiritual lawyer now, because this is exactly where I come from. And I wanted to make the difference between human law that can be aggravating and almost creating conflict. Because the moment you...
It's so adversarial. The more you resist, and it's positional. So the more the parties dig themselves into their position and resist, the bigger the problem grows, because they're both feeding it. Whereas the more you focus on just, putting both of you here and the problem over here, the more it shrinks. The more there is no problem. There is only an opportunity for conversation and agreement and being heard. So,
and for more love to come through.
For more love to come through,
This is probably not something that our listeners expected to hear. I'm so glad we said it. All right, so I'm looking a little bit at time, and I want to make sure that I thank you for coming to talk to me today by offering you a mini Akashic record session. So we talked about that before you agreed to the interview. Do you want to ask me a couple of questions about what it is, or are you happy for me to just go along?
I generally like to just see what comes through in these sorts of things and not to direct the meaning, because I tend to find with my intuition, the moment I ask a question, my intuition starts answering it. Okay. So in that way, I kind of block things off, and I'm always curious, if I don't say anything, what will come through?
Okay.
It might be an area that I hadn't even thought about.
You're so right.
Which is always fun.
You're so right. And let's park this as well. I want to talk to, or maybe we should talk about this right now, just before we do the little reading then. You talked about intuition, and you use your intuition quite a lot. How does that come into your work? How do you use it in action as a lawyer?
One of the biggest ways I find it coming through is when I'm writing a contract for a client, and I can't actually write the document for them until I have branded it for them. So it has to have their logo and be in their fonts and their colors. Because before then, it's like pulling teeth. I just cannot get the words to come. As soon as I brand it and put it into there, it's like opening a door. And suddenly their voice flows through me and I just type and it all comes together. So that's one of the main ways. Other than that, I think whenever I find myself getting blocked in my work, it's usually or getting overwhelmed or stuck in feeling that I'm not doing enough, all of those sorts of things. It's generally the way I bring myself back is by looking at how can I bring the mystic poet me back into the work. So it's only when that fun, only when it starts getting too strict, too tied down, too tied up in expectations and things that everything, the flow stops. So when I bring that mystic poet prophet type voice back in, then my business starts to be successful again. So I guess those are the two main ways that I use intuition in my work. And also I try and check in with my gut. I'm a generator in human design and I have a very strong sacral center. So when I try and check into my gut and say no to a client, if my gut feeling is clenching and fear, then I generally will say no, that I don't want to work with you. And similarly, when I'm, shopping in the heart-centered group or something, looking for whatever I'm doing, looking for a coach or a VA or something like that, it's based on gut feeling rather than on perhaps what my head might think is the next shiny thing to grab.
That's a good thing to do.
That's still a work in process. I have a very headstrong will up in my head, so tuning into my body and letting my body call the shots is something that I'm constantly working on, but it's always much more successful when I do.
I feel I have a very similar issues because my mind is so strong and has such preconceived ideas of what things should be like and that sort of thing. And then but when I follow my intuition, and it just means me stepping away from what I think should be, and I let the energy flow and let I could, instead of like look, as you say, looking for a VA, you have a list of all the criteria she needs to do, look like this or he or whatever, and then you tick all the boxes. You just call out to the universe and say, I need a VA, bring me someone perfect. And then they might not look the way we think they do, but because it happens fairly shortly after you've asked, you look at it with a more open mind. It's a completely different process, isn't it? Instead of coming from the logic, I say it comes from the magic of trusting that the universe is working for your highest good and is bringing things that you want, as long as you're able to keep an open mind about what's best for you.
Yeah, being totally open to the miracles in daily life.
Now we need to write this down. This is coming from two lawyers, that's kind of exceptional. We're having such an exceptional conversation, aren't we?
We are indeed.
And I appreciate that. Thank you for coming live for us.
You're very welcome.
I'm going to use a prayer to take us into your Akashic records. One question I want to ask you: would you want to go into the Akashic records of your business or your own? It doesn't really. Either
business,
way.
Please.
Okay. So, what is your business called legally?
It's my name. M. Whitehead.
Okay. All right. Let's get started. And so we acknowledge the forces of light, asking for guidance, direction, and the courage to know the truth as it is revealed to us for our highest good and the highest good of everyone connected to us. O Holy Spirit of light, protect me from all forms of self-centeredness and direct my attention to the work at hand. Help me to see Michelle Whitehead in the light of her business Akashic records, to see Michelle Whitehead in the eyes of the Lords of the Records, and enable me to share the wisdom and compassion that the masters, teachers, and loved ones of Michelle Whitehead have for her. The records are now open. Now, I really don't know if this is something you want to do in the long term, But what I'm seeing you is, I see there's a little bit of a background noise. I don't know if it's a microphone or something. Can you hear it?
Um, my kids just closed a door, but it shouldn't be.
No.
It's otherwise absolutely quiet here.
Okay. So what I'm seeing is that the potential for you, if you wanted, ultimately not to do any client work, but just to do teachings as a spiritual lawyer. I'm sorry if I'm not placating my own thing onto you. But I really see this. I see you traveling. I see you creating, and also, I don't know if that's something you've ever wanted to do, but I see you working with lawyers to really transform the profession in a very deep, deep way.
It is something I would love to do. I once thought, what should the collective noun for lawyers be? And I thought, wouldn't it be lovely if we could have a loveliness of lawyers?
Yeah, I definitely see that. And it's funny because you've never shared that with me. So this is something that came completely from the records and not me. But I really see you as moving into that. Maybe when your children are just a tiny bit older, that you can travel more easily. But I see you having a global impact with your work and in all sorts of areas of law, not just business law. And I see that also. What's interesting is that I don't know why they're showing this to me, but I see you doing that actually in open spaces, outdoors, rather than in offices. So you would literally take the lawyers to the park and then sit in
That does
circle.
sound like me, I must admit.
I see you sitting in circle as well. So I don't know if you have held circles before, and if that's something that appeals to you, but I really see you sitting in circle, starting with the guidelines of a circle. I'm in circle school, so I'm a little bit, but it's not because I know more about it now that I'm doing this work, but I really see you doing that and showing the lawyers that will come to you. I see you even possibly taking like a whole law firm or a whole department, and it would be not only this educational side of it, but also a team building exercise, because very often lawyers can feel that they have their little clients and they fight for their little corner in the law firm rather than seeing the law firm as a whole. Sometimes there's that part that's missing because of the fear. I know I experienced that myself. I was always very open. My files were always, anybody could pick up my file anytime if I went on holiday. And that I was so unusual, but I see you helping people feel more relaxed about that and raising the standards, the ethics. That's definitely something I see you doing. And you will probably do it first
Wonderful to
remotely.
do.
Sorry?
That would be something that I would love to do. That would be wonderful.
Well, it is there for you. It is in your records and it's definitely written. So it's only for you to trust that your work will lead you to that. Do you want me to ask them the timing of this?
No. I generally like to let things play out rather than ask for predictions of future in that sense. It's interesting actually because the dominant emotion that came up when you said it, other than excitement, was fear. Was the whole, I'm not good enough to do that. I can't go and talk to corporates. I can't change the culture of law firms. But at the same time, yes, that's what I would love to do. So, interesting.
So my invitation would be for you to clear that fear.
Yeah.
And this way, this wonderful work can come into your life fairly soon. I see that happening fairly soon. I'm not going to give you time scales, but that's probably the only thing that's stopping you from doing it at this point. It's your own fear.
And I would just be open to it showing up in whatever way it showed up, rather than feeling like it was something I needed to create and control.
Okay, so I have some feedback from whoever master teacher is here to speak to you and say, you can be more intentional than this. and they want you to own the fact that it's a desire, so that you show up 50%. So I think they're inviting you in the days to come to write, how would that look like? I saw that there was a circle, you sitting in a park and all that, and perhaps have go on a journey or a little visualization where you imagine what is it going to be like, by leaving the fear at the door as well. And you could even start writing your guidelines for your lawyer circles, and just then leave it, and because you've showed up for 50%, and the universe will meet you where you are.
That sounds lovely. I can do that.
Well, thank you for receiving this. And I would love to hear about it. This gets me so excited. so excited. Yeah. Do you have any questions about what we've just discussed? Because I like to keep it like short and sweet, so that it's, you know.
No, that's, I like the feeling of a seed being planted, and it's one that I had thought of previously, so it's nice to see it germinating. I think I planted it previously, and I can sort of feel it germinating a bit. So
it's definitely coming out of the ground. That's to keep our imagery consistent.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to thank the masters, teachers, and loved ones for their love and compassion. I would like to thank the Lords of the Records for their point of view, and I would like to thank the Holy Spirit of Light for the knowledge and the healing. The records are now closed. I don't know about you, but when I get in the records, there's this energy shift that happens, and it's almost like I feel I'm in this bath of really fresh and energy that makes me feel like I'm unstoppable. Like I have so much energy, I can do just anything I want. How did it feel for you?
Yeah, it was a very tingly confirmation type of feeling. Very positive, supported feeling.
Good. I'd like to talk, like, maybe just for a couple of minutes about risk management, because you recently sent on your newsletter that I receive, and I will either encourage people to sign up, or in any case share your website with our viewers above this video, and then for those who listen on the podcast, it will be in the notes. You talk about risk management in such a different way, in such a refreshing way from most lawyers that I know. And what you start with, and I just scanned your email before this interview, so I probably wouldn't do it because you have a whole blog post about it. But what I love about your approach is that you say just being curious. So instead of approaching risk management from a fearful point of view, it's more like, what if this happened? What could I do to make things better? And funny enough, we had to cancel this interview last week. So this is a typical risk management situation. And to be honest, I was in fear. I was like, what are people going to think? I'm letting people down. I was beating myself up. I wanted to push through the whole thing so I would show up. But it became very clear after an hour that it wasn't going to happen. So I had to put my risk management, even though I didn't think risk management back then, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to send an email out. I'm going to post it on my page, and so be it. Just to, instead of resisting the situation, I embraced it. So is that what you would recommend to people? Or?
I tend to describe risk, and in that sense, risk tends to be something we suppress. Like, you faced your risk, you made a choice about how to deal with it. Risk, if you had kept on forging on, you would have been suppressing it, forcing it down, and it builds up a pressure. I like to describe risks to imagine them as dragons, and we shovel these dragons down into the caves of our subconscious until the pressure builds so much that things explode. And when we bring those dragons out and get up close and loving and curious with them, we discover that some of them are limiting beliefs, and we can bless them and just let them fly away. Some of them will be real world dangers that we actually need to take action on. But the action may not be necessary right now. So they could be dragons that are warning you of an imminent danger that you actually have to go out and find out the information, make a decision, take some action, send the email, do the postponing, or, you know, whatever it is the right solution for you in that moment. And some of them you're going to put back down in your subconscious, but you're going to put them there not as something that's being suppressed, that's an unknown. It's like when you can just see the wisps of smoke coming out of the dragon's cave, it brings up fear because you don't know what you're facing. When you've actually got that dragon and you've looked at it from every angle and you've said, okay, yeah, so what is this dragon? How can it hurt me? How sharp are its claws actually? What do those teeth actually look like? Where are the scales? And you start to appreciate the beauty and the opportunity in there, in that dragon. Then you can start to make a real plan for how and what it needs. And it might just need vigilance. It might need to go back and bide its time. You know, it might be something that you're more aware of, rather than something that you were suppressing and that was increasing your fear and your subconscious sabotage, because our subconscious tries to keep us safe. And our subconscious's idea of safety tends to be our conscious mind's idea of sabotage. Yeah, so yeah.
When you were speaking about this, I was reminded of the whole GDPR thing that happened earlier this year, which of course, because I'm in Europe, I'm like frontline. And it was a very interesting thing because I saw myself resisting it and avoiding it. But it's when I faced it and I said, okay, I can't do everything perfect. I think that's a very important thing to say as well for our listeners, is that it's better to do something imperfect than do nothing when you have a risk, and take a step in the right direction, and maybe go on like a research binge, because the more information you have, the more you can make an informed decision. Whereas if you
Yes,
don't,
exactly.
ignoring a problem is certainly not going to put it away. It's just still there. So I love your idea of your image of the dragon. It's exactly that.
The other thing is that if it is a risk that's going to eventuate, when it does eventuate, when it comes true, when it actually happens, that's when, if you've kept it suppressed, when something happens, you're going to be reacting. And you're going to be in that reactive, panicked fight or flight mode where you can't make your best decisions.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've thought about it in advance, if you've examined it curiously, if you've made your plans, when it happens, you can respond. And you can respond from a position of calm and certainty and clarity, from that informed decision-making point. And the other thing to remember about all of this is that science has shown that the more we are encouraged to believe that we are successful decision makers, the more confidently we make decisions. So you actually become a better decision maker by facing these things and making decisions about them, rather than suppressing. If you suppress it, you're sort of saying, I'm too scared of this to make a decision about it. And that overall decreases your decision-making ability. So you might be scared of the GDPR and suppressing that because you don't want to deal with it. But at the same time, that's reducing your ability to make good decisions in your marketing and your clients and your budgeting and everything else, because you don't trust your own decision-making capacity. Whereas if you actually look into it, to start taking the baby step actions to deal with it, you get more confidence across the board in your decision making.
Yeah, and for our listeners who might not know what GDPR is, hopefully they do, but if they don't, is the European Directive on Data Protection that came into force. Was it in March sometime?
Yes.
Yeah. And even if you're not in Europe, as long as you have a European client, you have to be compliant with GDPR. And that's been a really interesting exercise for me, because I went back into my lawyer's mode, which I hadn't in ages actually, and it was lovely. I enjoyed, even though a lot of people came to it with fear, and I could feel the collective fear energy that repelled me at first. And I thought, of course I can do this. I'm a lawyer, which I was at an advantage, I suppose.
One of the things that I've told my clients too is when they've come to me with that sort of fear and panic and, I've got to do something about GDPR now, is actually you'd have to work quite hard. Like when we analyze the risk, what's your actual danger here? You'd actually have to work quite hard to get in trouble with GDPR. Like you'd have to wait, there would have to be an unhappy client who contacted you. You would have to ignore them. You would have to go on ignoring them over a period of time. They would need to make a complaint. The complaints body would contact you. You would have to ignore them, and on and on and on. So when you actually look through the process of what has to happen before something can go terribly wrong, there's lots of safety nets there that give you, like you would have to make a decision to suppress and ignore it at every stage. And certainly it's much, much better to make that decision up front and put the processes and the policies and everything in place. But if you're, for example, as most of my clients are, an Australian entrepreneur with maybe, someone from Europe might visit my website sometime, but what do I need to know? That then it's that information about what can actually go wrong that you need to know, that helps you step out of, okay, this isn't a problem, but it is an opportunity. It's not actually a threat. I thought it was a threat. It's not a threat. It's an opportunity. And the opportunity is to put the policies and procedures in place so that I know how I handle my client's data. I know that I'm only collecting the data I need. I know that I'm storing it safely and looking after their sensitive information that they trust me with. And overall, I'm improving the trust and care levels in my business.
And
so it's that flipping from threat to opportunity.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because for me, I saw it as an incredible opportunity to raise standards and to be more caring for your clients rather than, or your potential clients, rather than be defensive and say that I'm doing this to protect myself. And I think
exactly. And
spirit is the spirit of this whole directive as well.
Exactly. And you don't need to, if you're an Australian entrepreneur, for example, you don't need to comply with GDPR because of the legislation or the Australian privacy principles. That shouldn't be your main reason for actually doing this. It should be because your clients are trusting you with their personal and sensitive information, and you honor and respect that trust. That's your primary motivation for doing this, not that some great big judge somewhere is going to slap you on the hand with a big ruler and fine you thousands of dollars, because that may never happen. But your clients trusting you is happening every day. And how can you honor that trust that they're placing in you?
Beautiful. I think we've gone over the hour. So I want to add just one more point, is that I think that even though not everyone listening to this interview will be under Australian law, New South Wales law, I think you can still bring a lot to people to help them with their businesses. Because, for example, personally, I did buy your DIY pack for my terms and conditions on my website, and it helped me tremendously to write them. And people I invite them to go and check them out. They're not your product, they're my product, but I was inspired by your guidelines, so they can check them out at icanhelpyouthrive.com/legals. I think it's called something like that, and there's 3 different bits, because then all you need to do after that is just check that it's compliant with your local law, but you have a framework to work with, and you have the spirit of how to approach it. You have some lovely questions that you ask to help us identify risk as well, because just because you have a website, immediately you have a responsibility and a potential risk. which is not something that I actually, even though I'm a lawyer, I've switched off my lawyer bit so much when I went into business because there was so much to learn to start with. But it's true that you need to be mindful of how you do it, and having terms and conditions on your website is, well, you don't need a website to start business. I need to say this right away. So it can wait until you're more mature in business and that you feel more confident and all sorts of things. But you would still need some sort of terms and conditions at some point. So I would then attach them maybe in the online scheduler like Acuity or Calendly. You can actually put them there. So I think your pack would be useful whether people have a website or not, because it's important to have that framework. It's like scaffolding people so that they know what they sign up for. And I had recently, I signed up a VIP, and she thanked me for having a contract because she had had a bad experience with another coach where she tried to find a time that was convenient for her to have the sessions with this coach, and the coach couldn't find one but wouldn't give her money back. And I thought, oh my god, how can someone do that, something like that to their clients? I can't even envisage it. And for me, it's very clear in my policies that if we can't find an hour that works for both of us, of course I'm going to give you a refund.
Yes,
and then I
exactly.
state this condition
One of the
that it happens, it's very clear you're going to get a refund on this rate and not this rate, and it's all kind of nicely packaged and explained. So
the analogy I use with website terms and conditions is you wouldn't open up your house for a come one, come all party without putting some house rules in place. And so your website terms and conditions, you've got people coming from all over the world, and it's actually keeping your home on the internet the way that you like it. It's setting the ground rules for how people interact with your site. And also a lot of people, people say nobody reads terms and conditions. The people who read your website terms and conditions are the people who who'd like to work with you, but who are a little bit worried about doing so. They've got some questions, they've got some fears, they've got some concerns that they'd like to iron out. And so when they read, the more information you put into your terms and conditions about how you work and what they can expect, the more they feel like they're going to be treated fairly, like they can get a flavour for who you are, the more likely they are to go ahead and work with you, which is why it's such an advantage to have terms and conditions that you've written yourself that are completely tailored to your business, because your personality shines through them.
And that's exactly what is crucial, that your personality shines through what you write. Because if it's a lawyer writing it, and with the lawyer jargon and the lawyer attitude, and I'm saying the common lawyer, I'm sorry to say this, but in this way, then it can actually repel you and make you feel scared, because that energy will be different from yours. Thank you so much.
The majority of lawyers, just as the last point, the majority of lawyers, being based in fear of doing something new and different, will just they'll repurpose a precedent. So they'll just change a few details, and it's just like buying one of those generic templates. It's generic. It's absolutely standard. It's not. There is no personality, and as you say, that really does change the energy. And setting the intention setting function of the document.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but it's crucial to set your intent. Yeah, beautiful. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. I feel so blessed to be able to talk to someone as enlightened as you are with legal matters. And I hope it's inspired our listeners as well. And if they have any questions, I'll send them your way.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.